Understand after you see that and what they did, they branded human beings. And then remember that that narrative, we're the civilizing force of barbarians, is exactly what Tucker Carlson said last night. The main reason why Americans defend the monarchy is because of this.
A key part of the job for members of the royal family. They can be full of energy, flag waving and photo opportunities. In recent times, though, there have been some awkward moments.
Just awkward.
And for some, they have been a reminder of the monarchy's difficult imperial past.
Slavery was abhorrent, and it should never have happened.
As of June 2022, the British Crown was still legally head of state in these 15 countries, all former British colonies or protectorates. But increasingly, there have been calls for the British monarch to be removed as head of state.
Ladies and gentlemen, their Royal Highnesses, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, have arrived. Please stand.
They shouldn't be welcomed as leaders of the country, as representatives of the head of state. How these two young white people now going to be here saying we are going to kowtow to them and we are going to bend and bow and kneel to them. Those days are done. The monarchy is a relic.
In the Caribbean, some people want the royal family to provide reparations for their role in slavery. So what exactly are the monarchy's links to the slave trade?
The royal family's links to slavery began during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. The crown and the royal family was deeply involved in the slave trade and making money off the slave trade. Charles II granted a charter to the Royal Adventurers originally, and they were then reconstituted as the Royal African Company to deal directly in enslaved Africans and to sell them in the New World, but primarily to the colonies in the Caribbean and mainland North America.
This was one of the greatest atrocities in human history. And those who suffered in this atrocity are persons from the region, a lot of persons from the Caribbean region. And that suffering was not only immense, it was generational. And a lot of wealth was derived from the suffering, a lot of benefits was derived from the suffering.
The brands that were used on the bodies of enslaved people featured the name of monarchs. So for example, the Duke of York, one of the brands that was used by the Royal African Company with the letters DY, and this was actually instructed to be put onto the bodies of enslaved people. So they are making it very clear that the royal family is involved, that the royal family supports the slave trade, and that actually because the royal family supports it, this is a good investment. This is a safe investment. This was seen as the way to build an empire, but also as a way to convert Africans to Christianity. That was the primary argument that was made at the time. So the crown saw itself as a civilizing, Christianizing force that, yes, they were profiting, and yes, they were supplying laborers to the colonies, but they also saw themselves as on the right side because they were expanding and civilizing the world.
The wise African chiefs.
Understand after you see that and what they did, they branded human beings. And then remember that that narrative, we're the civilizing force of barbarians, is exactly what Tucker Carlson said last night when defending the history of British colonial enslavement and rule. One of those civilizing forces in that regard was, again, the person that he called a philanthropist and not a fucking slave trader.
Have seen the tremendous changes in Nairobi to which the princess herself referred in her speech.
The contrast we see today is a striking tribute to the men and women of all races who have made it a great center of commerce and finance, the crossroads of East Africa, the capital of your colony, and the seat of the East Africa High Commission.
So of course that family has benefited from enslavement, and so has many institutions in this country, whether it's the railways, the roads, the banks, HSBC, Barclays, And the enslavers were compensated when slavery was ended, and the compensation didn't stop getting paid until 2015. So people like me were paying actually for compensation for the enslavers. But the people who were enslaved were never compensated. We never even got an apology.
By the 1790s, there's a growing groundswell of support for abolition in Britain. But the royal family is deeply opposed to the abolition of the slave trade. George III did not come out publicly and say that he was against the slave trade, but he made it very clear to his ministers that he would not support abolition as a cabinet measure. So this was something that the public knew, that the royal family was against abolition, that the royal family believed that the slave trade was crucial to maintaining Britain's wealth and power and its imperial interests.
Repairing that damage is something that both Prince Charles and Prince William have tried to do in recent years, with some of the strongest words yet from members of the royal family when it comes to links to slavery, and some have seen it as a real shift in attitudes.
From the darkest days of our past and the appalling atrocity of slavery, which forever stains our history.
By the way, in 1837, there was an act known as the Slave Compensation Act. 40,000 awards were given, and they lasted until 2015. Want to know who got it? Oh, that's right. They were issued to slave owners. Now, if that sounds familiar to you, that means you're probably a Hasnanbi head who has heard me talk about the only reparations afforded in the United States of America. Because we did that too. 40 acres and a mule? Nope. Black, you're getting nothing. During the Reconstruction era, the newly freed African men and women not get compensated, not get reparations. It was the slave owners that were compensated and got reparations for all of the slaves that they had freed. You know, they were subsidized for the loss in capital. Until 2015. I want to point out, until 2015, payments were made. Slave owners. Until 2015.
I want to express my profound sorrow. Slavery was abhorrent, and it should never have happened.
Expressing sorrow, but not saying sorry. And there's been so much discussion in Jamaica, where they've just come from, about an apology for slavery. How are you feeling about that debate here?
Slavery? Well, we're not independent. We're not given freedom. Okay, so slavery to me, it's been abolished. So why go back in time, and move forward?
It wasn't him. It was back on.
Forgive it. That was history. That was the past. We're moving forward right now.
Yes.
It's making the Bahamas a better place.
Yes.
And that's the best thing we can do.
Yes, that's all.
Yeah.
Not that we are prepared to forget. Yeah. We'll never forget. And we will always remember our history. We will always teach it. But it actually helps us to appreciate where we're going and to know where we are going.
In Canada, the anger that's been directed at the royal family has all been to do with the treatment of indigenous people while the country was still part of the British Empire. In 2021, statues of both Queen Victoria and Queen Elizabeth II were toppled on Canada Day. It followed the shocking discovery of unmarked graves at school sites, where Indigenous children had been forcibly taken from their families during the reign of Queen Victoria.
My parents, my grandparents, my aunt, uncles, and a bunch of them, they all went to residential schools.
It's still scarred the community.
They're still scarred, so it happened to our parents and grandparents, but it's still affecting us.
Indigenous communities in Australia and New Zealand have also taken issue with the royal family. Indigenous Australians say that Britain never acknowledged that Australia was owned by Aboriginal people before it was colonised by the British in 1788.
The colonisation of both countries included violence, it included disease and dispossession, and it certainly included massacre. There's a whole range of things that happened to Aboriginal people. A number of communities, and in fact I would suggest most, were impacted quite profoundly by having their culture either denied to them or their language denied to them.
In New Zealand, Indigenous people have protested the Treaty of Waitangi, a founding agreement between the British Crown and a number of Maori chiefs. The agreement contained protections and land rights for Maori people that were never honoured.
That's crazy. Huh.
1995, the Queen delivered an apology from the British Crown to New Zealand's biggest Maori tribe for the seizure of Maori lands by British.
Was the thing that she just went along with the crimes, or did she actively participate? Wait, let me run that again, sorry.
Never honoured. In 1995, the Queen delivered an apology from the British Crown to New Zealand's biggest Maori tribe for the seizure of Maori lands by British colonisers. And in 2005, a topless protester wrote, "Get your colonial shame off my breasts," as Prince Charles toured the country. In recent times, the Crown has...
They give back the money or the land, or how does that work? Did they honor the treaty? Also, the Christianizing, civilizing was just a joke. They still enslaved and brutalized black people even after they converted to Christianity. Yeah, of course.
sought to distance itself from colonialism and racial prejudice.
May I just say that while I'm here with my husband as a member of the royal family, I want you to know that for me, I am here with you as a mother, as a wife, as a woman of color, and as your sister.
The one time someone from outside, the descendant of enslaved people, married into the royal family, she was not treated well and alleged.
In 1995, the apology was also accompanied, for those of you who are also asking, like I am. The apology also accompanied a return to the Maoris 39,000 of the 1.25 million acres of land that the British had confiscated in the Waikato region, and a $42 million fund for Maoris to buy back privately owned land that was once theirs. A small group of tribal elders broke into a soft traditional chant after the Queen signed the deed, but another dozen tribal claims remain from last century's confiscation, and a tribunal set up to hear Maori grievances is slowly processing more than 400 other claims. They got 39,000 back from the 1.2 million that they said that they were going to give and protect. Maoris genocided a tribe in the 1500s, so whatever. Yeah, no, that's why it's okay. Yeah, that's why you got to genocide them back extra hard. Like, hey, they're like, what about black on black crime in Chicago? Is that what you're saying? Is that the take? I think that person is joking, by the way. He's, for the record, I'm certain. I don't think that person is literally saying that as a justification. I think they're joking, saying like this is the justification that people try to use, like Americans always used against the indigenous tribes here. Yeah, they returned 0.0312% of their land alongside an apology. Or is it 3%? Not 0.03%? 3%? I don't know. Math is hard. 500 years right on the statute of limitations for genociding genociders. Homo sapiens killed the Neanderthal so I can murder whoever I want. Yeah, I'm Bro, the Maori weren't based, so the British also massacred Indians, First Nations, and Aborigines. Yeah, that's why they did it. You know, that's just another way of saying they civilized the barbarians, for the record.
That she had been horribly treated and ended up fleeing the royal family and is no longer an active royal.
The royal family a racist family, sir?
We're very much not a racist family.
The image of the monarchy in some ways is more important than anything, and by all respects, they have failed.
Yeah, they look like shit. Also, on top of the racism stuff.
Recently, with the treatment of Meghan Markle, the royal tours, the backlash against the crown, none of it is good, and none of it bodes well for the survival of this institution, especially among the younger generations.
And the Meghan Markle case is really interesting because she's a light-skinned mixed-race woman. She's almost white passing to a certain extent. She's much lighter than me. So she has certain privileges that dark-skinned black women probably wouldn't have. Yet she was still attacked by the mainstream media, by the social media trolls, by commentators, by people inside the royal family. So that showed a spotlight on this country that we're not as progressive as we think we are, that we still have an issue with race in this country. And I think a lot of the time we think the race issue is something that's just focused on America, which is why the uprising in 2020, I think, caught a lot of people off guard because they're like, oh, racism just happens in America, it's just George Floyd. But we never want to look at the racism that actually is taking place in this country.
The royals still have a lot of support overseas, but in the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement, there
Hasan, bu eylemler yapılırken aynı zamanda parlamentoları da vardı. Royallerin yanında onlara da yüklenirsen daha fair. Oğlum sen salak mısın? Ben hayatımda ne zaman parlamentoyu korumuş bir insanım? Manyak mısın sen? Benim Margaret Thatcher için falan dediğim şeyleri duymamışsın herhalde. O yüzden böyle düşünüyorsun. Yani var ya, yine söylediğim şeyler, kraliçeye söylediğim şeyler var ya, Margaret Thatcher için söylediğim şeylerin yanında güzel durur yani. Yani 10 kat daha kötü şeyler 10 kat daha kötü şeyler söyledim Margaret Thatcher için. Bu amına kodumun kraliçesine göre, yani onunla compare edersen.
has been a shift, and we could now see countries following in the footsteps of Barbados by removing the British monarch as head of state.
There is really no support for maintaining some of these colonial ties in the 21st century. Once the Queen is gone, there are already many colonies, former colonies, leaving now while the Queen is still alive. And I think that is really the most sobering aspect of this, that Barbados has already left, Jamaica is signaling that it will leave. If these former colonies are already now trying to sever ties and become truly independent, what is to stop other members of the Commonwealth?
Is that okay for you? Like having the one family royalty where it's they're given all the wealth, all of the. That's not okay for us. So.
As a black person, I just can't relate to an institution that was been founded on colonialism, imperialism, and enslavement of my ancestors. Their imagery has been used as propaganda because they are the new faces of colonialism. They are the new faces of imperialism. They are the new faces of social hierarchy and class. And I think a lot of people are buying into that without actually analysing what these new generations of royal family actually represent.
They are the figurehead for the colonial process, but they are not the people that did the colonialism. I belong to the Indigenous community, and many people that I know are very supportive of the monarchy, and many would prefer that we were a republic. We shouldn't really anticipate that there would be a homogenous Aboriginal view of any event, and particularly something as important as, say, becoming a republic.
A republic.
You think it's time to become a republic?
I think it's time to become a republic, right? So just let go of the slavery, let go of the Queen. Just focus on set a goal and a direction.